Okay, so this is a very just short and sweet, hopefully low-key video today because I made a very impulsive decision the other day, knowing that there was a solid chance the announcement coming today on the 29th from Sony is that the A7C II is going to be released, which, yeah, I could have waited for that, but I really didn't want to. I've not been happy with my A7C for a lot of reasons. I spent a lot of time on Sunday just testing it against my different cameras, and honestly, it was my least favorite to use, even over like my Olympus, which I really don't choose to use as much anymore. And that made me realize that I really just need, as much as it sucks because I just bought it like 2 months ago, and I only bought a cheap 50 and a cheap 85 to go with it at the time. So at least I hadn't put a ton extra into it, but I realized this was kind of my time to go and sell that camera and actually get a decent amount for it. And my thought was, I'm just gonna buy the less expensive and smallest Canon body because I already have all the Canon gear and lenses. So I ended up, I was going to get the RP again, even though I wasn't super happy with it. It still got me through a lot and it was great. Or I was gonna get the R. Didn't really know much about the newest ones that they released. I honestly thought most of them were crop sensors, but the girl that helped me out at the camera store where I sold my Sony back actually told me that the R8 would be a good option because it's basically the successor to the RP and the R in a way because it's the same body size and everything as the RP. The dials on top are a little bit more like the R6 Mark II, but the tech is a little bit more wide. It's the upgraded of the R. Either way, this is my Canon R8, so hopefully you guys can see that. This is just with the 50mm kit lens, or wow, 50mm like nifty 50 lens on it. This is so lightweight too, which is really nice. It's not as fun to use as like my Olympus or my Fuji's, which is why those are more my everyday fun cameras. But every time we've gone somewhere to take either photos of ourselves, like self-portraits with my husband, or travel, and I take a different camera, like I like the photos I get of my Fuji, but when I want really good like self-portraits of us, every time I go, I really wish I had my Canon. And he's like, you say that every single time. I think you just need to bring your Canon with you every time. But like I've said before, didn't want to be bringing my main camera body, my R6, on vacations and things in case anything happens to it, even though it is insured. I wanted to be protective of it. So my mind said, okay, I also don't want to bring my 5D4 because that's just huge and I want compact. That's the whole reason I went with the A7C, was for how compact it was. With my R8, if I were to bring that on trips, I have a second 50mm because I have this one and then I have the big EF12 that is my main one. I also have two 85s because I have my giant 85 that is always on my R6. So, gosh. This is heavy. And this is pretty much what I use all the time. And I also have the 85f2. So if I go on a trip, I'm pretty much just going to be bringing the ones that are already basically like my backup anyway, and then probably also my 35, which is the only 35 that I have. But that's the only thing that, like, if something happened to it, I don't have a like immediate replacement for it. So here is my Canon R6 with the 85, which is what I usually shoot on for all my professional shoots. This is my R8 with the 50mm. Obviously, there are some downsides to the R8. I understand that. But again, my whole point was to have another camera body that can be used as my second, but also as a travel camera. And yes, I am aware that there is only one camera card slot. I know y'all are going to come at me for that. However, again, this is why I turn my comments off, because I don't need your opinions. I don't mind that. My other camera has dual card slots. My 5D4, which I also take, has dual card slots. And I don't take as many, like when I did a photo shoot the other night, I had my 35 on this. I took some on this. If I had started taking more on this, I would have just switched the cards out to make sure that my cards are safe and protected for at least most of the images. That's what you do. I don't need to have two R6s. And then I also know that the battery is obviously not as good. It's the LP-E17 battery. So the same as the RP, which of course when I sold my RP, I sold the batteries, so I have to get more batteries for this. But like, and I know the funny thing is, I heard it doesn't have a mechanical shutter. Thought that was going to be an issue. Like, okay, I'm going to use the first curtain electronic shutter, hope that everything's great, because the Sony, I had issues even indoor when I couldn't have the shutter on because it was so loud and I had to use the electronic shutter, and I had a lot of banding issues. Granted, if I have to turn the electronic only on this, I might have that too. We'll see. I'll test it tomorrow at church, which is when I would normally use that. But I went and looked in my R6, and I don't even have it on mechanical shutter. I have it set on first curtain electronic. So I didn't even know that. So then I'm like, well, I guess I'm not that worried. The only thing is it is a little loud when it takes photos, which my RP was as well. So it's a little louder, but that's not that big a deal. Like, again, for most situations, that's not that bad. Honestly, this sounds about the same as like if I'm using my 5D4. It's really about the same noise level, so it's not that bad. There's no IBIS in the camera, which we all knew, but most of the RF lenses have IBIS, so I'm not really concerned again about that because the lenses have it. And I'm not using it for like vlogging, I'm using it just for still portraits. I'm not a videographer, which I know this is made more for almost video people with all the specs, but I'm using it for a small photo. I also wanted to show you guys compared to my Fujifilm XT32 with the 50. So they are like very similar in size, other than like obviously this thumb grip is the biggest difference I feel like. Let's see. Weight-wise, they're about the same. So yeah, this is a little bit more bulky than this obviously, but I don't think it's that big of a difference. Like if I were to take, my R6 is quite a bit bigger than this, so if I were to take that on a trip, I would notice it. I'm still debating what I'm even going to take on our trip next year because I want amazing star photos, which is where I'm like, maybe I need to take the Olympus. But then I also want my full frame shots and I also want my Fujifilm shots. I'm ridiculous, I know. And I know that this can get great star shots too because most of my favorite astrophotography shots I've done actually on my Canon, actually on my 5D4. So I would like to at some point go and do some more astrophotography, maybe this year before we go on trips, test it out with this camera and also with my Olympus and kind of decide from there which are my favorite and which I'd like to use, because when we go out west, that's going to be like the best chance I'm ever going to have for good astrophotography. That's kind of my main thoughts on this. Again, the main things I didn't like about the Sony, one of the biggest things, and this is probably only like specific to me and not everybody else, is I use that interval timer all the time on my cameras. I know you can set a regular timer, but you also have to have someone in the shot to focus on, because if you want to have like that blurred background behind you, you have to have something there to like have the focus hit. The Canons refocus after every shot. I think my Olympus did too, which is why I don't remember ever having that issue before. My Sony does not, and it's not an option. I like have Googled and searched it, and many other people have the same issue. I actually don't think my Fuji does as well. We took some self-portraits the other night with just my XT32 because that's what I had with me. And I was struggling to get the focus right on that. I could focus on my husband, but sometimes even then it would miss focus, which was really weird. But I love having a camera that refocuses after each shot, which is why this is really important to me, because I know that it works that way. Again, with Sony, I had the banding issue, which I had with my Olympus as well. So my Canon's the only one where I've never had that issue. So again, that was kind of another thought process there. And I don't remember ever having it with the RP, which is why I think this should be fine too. I'm trying to think here, what else? There were some other issues. Oh, I didn't like the old menu system on the A7C. And I hated that the menu button was like up here. So like my little hands, I was like, I can't hit the menu button easily. It was just kind of a mess. The phone app, again, for if you're trying to take self-portraits, look, it was the old app. It was terrible. And I know a lot of those issues may be solved with the A7C too, but it just didn't seem worth it to me, because then I would have had to pay a lot more, whereas I traded in my A7C and all the gear and was able to get this body. So I already have lenses that go with it. And in hindsight, yeah, this probably made more sense. Now, was the A7C a little more fun to use because it was like the cool black and silver and it was smaller, more compact? Yeah. I also took it on a whole trip with me where the only other cameras I took were, well, this, my G7X Mark III, and then my X100V, and I never pulled my Sony out of my bag. I only used my X100V on the whole trip. So, and like, just in case you're wondering, in comparison, obviously this is going to be a lot smaller, but like, it's still not bad. Like, if I were to have to take all this on a trip out west with me next year, probably still be fine. I'd just take a very nice little camera bag with me everywhere. And have lots of options. But I'm really excited about this. I already used it on a professional shoot with my R6, and it was great. So I'm going to use it some more this week, and we'll see how it goes.